So, morning everyone. Martin Underwood, World After Sport. Thank you for joining today. Sporting transition with Phil Davis and you guys. Do some quick intros and we'll crack on with the session. So, look forward to that. So, Phil, let me pass over to you first.
Yes, thanks, Matt, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to come on and chat and pass on valuable experiences. And that's where Martin and I started discussing a few weeks ago about the transitions, from players to coaches, coaches to business, as Bernard and I have touched on, and also coaching to coaching, really going from different jobs and the importance of learning and preparing during those periods, So I think it'll be a good discussion. Monday was great, and I think there's a lot of people on here with, amazing experiences, and hopefully the learning can help, help everybody on the call and, the other people that will tune into the YouTube and other sessions moving forward. So, Andre, should I pass to you?
Yeah, obviously, Andre Snyman's ex-South African rugby player. Started coaching after my career in 2007, traveled the world started South Africa to Leeds, back to South Africa, America, and now back to Doncaster. So all over the world. But yeah, thanks for having me on this chat.
Let me pass to Sam.
I'm presuming that's me. There's not more than one Sam,
There's only one Sam. There's only one Sam.
So I'm just trying to flick on, check who's on. I'm not sure if there's another Sam. So I'm Sam Warburton, former international rugby player, also finished playing in 2018, and since then, my work has been a mixture of a bit of television work, a bit of public speaking, recently some coaching, and some of my own business interests as well.
Brilliant, thanks, Sam. Steve Anderson.
Yeah, g'day, guys. I'm probably one of the elder statesmen on this group by the look around the screen. I've been professional coaching for about 27 years. Transitioned from professional rugby league into rugby union coaching. That would have been about 2002. I left league. I was the head coach of Warburton at the time, and then went on to Scottish Rugby. Now at Rugby Australia, and currently in the portfolio of Director of Rugby WA. I'll keep that very short. As I said, I'm the elder statesman in the group. I'll pass it on to one of my employees, actually, Dylan.
Thanks, Edo. So my name is Dylan. I'm the coach manager at Rugby WA, but also working under Ando in the senior academy lead coach, working with our boys that feed into the Western Force and our Aussie rep teams as well. So it's a short little snippet on what I'm up to.
Thank you, Dylan. Richie?
Yeah, morning everybody. My name is Richie Williams. I'm currently Director of Rugby at Cambridge, who play in National 1 in England. In addition to that, I'm doing a little bit of work with the Hungarian Rugby Union, which is really challenging but fun at the same time. I'm looking at their coach development and player pathway models. So again, I've been doing that for going on 3 seasons. I was quite lucky that Phil managed to come across to Budapest. I think it was 2 years ago, Phil, or maybe a year ago. And I looked after Phil that evening, didn't I, Phil? Kept you away from all the bad places. But no, really, really excited, obviously, to be on this talk today and hopefully be able to share some of my experiences. I'm coming from a teaching background, so I've made the transition into full-time coaching. And again, always prepared to, share any ideas and hopefully pick up some things off you more experienced people.
Brilliant, thank you. Bernard?
Yeah, hi guys. Glad to be on the group. My name is Bernard Jackman, ex-professional rugby player. Then transitioned into coaching. Went down to France, a club called FCG Grenoble for 5 years, and then went across to Wales for a year and a half. Got sacked there last January and came back to Dublin. My family were in Dublin. I was commuting from Wales. We sent our kids back to school in Ireland after having 5 years in France. And I always continued to do some media work and some corporate work. And now I've transitioned into financial data sales with a company called Refinitiv, which was Thomson Reuters. So I've kind of recently got out of coaching at professional level into corporate world, and still coaching a club team and doing a bit of coaching in a school and keeping my media interests up. But yeah, delighted to meet you guys, and hopefully we can build up a good network.
Thanks, Bernard. Hoggy?
Yeah, similar. Former professional player, finished off at Leeds with Phil, went straight into academy coaching, been coaching since 2003. So academy at Leeds, then Gloucester for 7-8 years, Worcester, and then currently forwards coach at Ospreys.
Brilliant. Thank you, Hoggy. Mr. Holman?
Well, completely different actually, because I'm not a professional coach or professional player, but I'm vice president of a club in Honiton. I love my rugby, and over the years, I've grown many trusted friends who played the game, professional players, and I just try and help them when I can out of my own industry, which is in the automotive industry. And I've always given my time to try and help players with helping the transition, what they need. And I've been speaking with Martin, and he said, you know, happy for you to join. So I feel a bit of an outsider compared to the experience here in the room with the rugby game, but that's what I'm here to listen and understand to what the needs are. And I think it's a great thing that Martin's doing. So
thanks, Mark. And guys, I guess just for Mark's benefit as well, what World After Sport do is work with the athlete to make sure and support them wherever they may need it, whether that's financial support, automotive support, support with moving home, because obviously as an athlete you move around a lot. So there's a lot of companies and businesses we work with and have associations with, so we can support them. So Mark's one of those, and Mark's been incredibly helpful and supportive over the first couple of months of getting this going. So thanks, Mark. Johan, we're just doing quick introductions. Do you want to give a quick intro to yourself? I hope you can hear us. And if you can't, we'll go to Tim.
Good morning, everyone.
sorry,
Morning, Johan. How are you?
I'm fine, and you? Sorry, I'm not really looking that presentable, and I'm standing here with the newborn baby in my arm, but I'm just basically here to listen and to appreciate what you guys have to say. As somebody who's been in sport broadcasting and obviously a big interest in rugby, and heading into the field of sports psychology, I'm really interested to hear how you guys tackle this problem that I think is very prevalent all over the world, but in South Africa in particular.
Thank you. Great. Tim, welcome.
Yeah, good morning, everyone.
Morning, Tim.
That's it from me.
Thanks.
I recognise these guys from Monday, a lot of them. But yeah, hi Sam. Good to see you again, mate.
Yeah, good to see you again, Tim.
And Phil, I enjoyed, you know what, boys, I just really enjoyed chatting to Monday. The thing that came out for me was just reconnecting. And it's such a big opportunity for us in this lockdown period just to, you know, to plan for a bigger and better future, isn't it?
Hope so. And I'm glad to hear that the first two words coming out of your mouth today, Tim, weren't the same as on Monday. So well done, mate. Yeah,
I've got to remember, although I'm in my kid's bedroom, it does go into the big world of wide web, doesn't it?
It does, mate. It does. And we are recording, Tim, so be aware. But thanks for joining us again, mate. Really appreciated. So let me get to the crux of it then, guys. So Phil, I'm going to pass to you in 1 second. Is really just from your experience, share your thoughts on the transition, because you've done it multiple times, not just the transition from player to tomorrow, but player to coach, coach to coach, club to international, and all sorts, you know, globally. So what's your thoughts on transition? And maybe that can open conversation. And people, guys, please do dive in, join the conversation, ask questions and share thoughts as well. So Phil, I'll start with yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I think I look at it as sort of twofold in a way. Firstly, as a player, you know, I was an amateur at Llanelli, played for Wales during, you know, the sort of mid-80s until the mid-90s, really. And then I went into professional coaching at Leeds in 1996. And the biggest thing that I found in the beginning was when I was a player, obviously, and I was working, I had a job with a company in Wales, was going from a situation where somebody was organising your schedule, if you like, and your plan, to then going into coaching and being the one that had to create the schedule and the plan, learning and challenging, really, because, you know, obviously when you work, you win 8 to 4, whatever it is, it's all planned for you to an extent. Same at the rugby club in Llanelli with Gareth Jenkins, the coach. So I was always reliant on other people to do the planning and the organising, but then going obviously into professional coaching in Leeds, I was actually the one then that was doing all that other stuff. So I found that quite challenging in the beginning, and got over that and moved forward. And then over the years, since '96, I've coached nearly every year until, well, to the present day in various places. Some exotic places like Namibia, where I met Johan when we were going to the World Cup qualifications more recently. You know, I've coached in France with Hilliard Rouen, you know, in North Wales, the WIU, Cardiff, Scarlet. So the key thing I've learned out of all those transitions is along the way learning more about myself, increasing my self-awareness. And in fact, then, you know, understanding the awareness and the needs of others in order to build rapport. You know, you're going into different contexts. As Bernard would know, coaching in France is different than coaching in Wales. I know that is obvious, but it's really, really important to understand, you know, the customs, the culture of the country, or the different clubs. So yeah, the coaching transition has been more about improving self-awareness, I feel, and also being aware, more awareness of others in the process. So those are the couple of things that, you know, I've learned, you know, on my coaching journey in terms of the transitions, really.
And what would you say is the biggest challenge from there, Phil?
In the coaching is going in and, you know, coach the coaching. For example, going into Namibia 5 years ago with World Rugby, it was a case of they had a high performance program, World Rugby, and Namibia had a high performance program as well. That was a loose term, that, by the way. But anyway, it's one of the biggest things we learned was their understanding of high performance and our understanding of high performance was vastly different, and it was far apart. And the challenge was trying to close that, you know, gap and understanding over a period of time, and bring people, you know, along with you, and not telling them what to do. There's a lot of guided discovery in there over the period of time, and bringing people along the journey, because I found the Namibians to be some of the nicest people I've ever met in the game, but also the most stubborn. You know, you'd have fantastic conversations. They like to please and say yes, yes, yes. But then the actual implementation took a lot longer. And I think over the time, you develop a lot of skills of persuasion and understanding, and also respect that you're a guest in their country as well. And those things are very, very important, you know, to firstly set the context, understand what, you know, what their understanding is of high performance, and then work through it with them in order to achieve a team that can compete on a global stage, you know, and who weren't professional. There's only, I think, there's under 1,000 players, Johan, playing rugby in Namibia. So to go to a global competition and be competitive was a big challenge. You know, I remember the first meeting I had with them, and I said to them, look, you know, what do you want to do? And they said, oh, we want to win the first game of the world, our first game at the World Cup in England. And I thought, well, I was quite impressed with that ambition, until I realised that the first game was against the All Blacks. So we realised then we didn't have a bloody hope in hell of winning the game. But so that's what I mean. It's so important to get a clear understanding of what's possible and the realities you need to go through to actually get there, you know.
I guess there's aiming high there, Phil, and there's aiming really, really high.
Well, yeah, I think they were off the stratosphere in terms of aiming high to play this game. But it was good. It was an amazing experience, because, you know, we knew we were going into certain games where we couldn't win. But it was very, very important to look at, that's where you look at the process of preparation rather than the outcome of winning, if you like, in order to create a team and an organisation that is as functional as possible and is maximising its potential. You know?
Brilliant, thank you. Sam, I'm going to come to you, because obviously for you, you're probably the youngster of the group in terms of transition. How's it been for you?
I had some pretty good advice as I was playing, because there's guys, I think now they're much better at doing, which Carl will know, being at the Ospreys now with the WRPA, they're much more proactive in getting players to do things for life after rugby. But when I was playing, which wasn't obviously long ago, but I remember in my younger days, a couple of people might come in and speak every other year and say the importance of it, but it wasn't actually backed up with anything. But I had pretty good advice from when I was 19, 20 years of age. I still use the same, for example, financial advisor now that I did then, who was just my dad's good friend, who he trusted. I use people I trust, which is the most important thing. Just getting like a private pension or an ISA, just simple things in place, which you see a lot of young kids blowing money on watches and nice leases on cars, and they've got their priorities completely wrong, you know. So it might be a bit boring, but like a lot of young players are like, live fast, die young. Me and Reece Patchell always used to say, live slow, die old. That was my motto when it comes to financial planning. And then through my career, whenever I played for Wales, then I would always invest my money into property. I was really keen on property, and luckily I had Peter Thomas at the Blues, who was chairman at the time, who runs Atlantic, a big property firm. So I'd always pick his brains on property investments. I've done property investment throughout my career. So then when it came to a point where I wanted to retire, I wanted to be in a position I could retire when I wanted to. So I did have a little bit of a wobble and a panic. I remember speaking to my agent. I've got nothing. Like, if I actually finish tomorrow, I've got nothing apart from the small investments that I've made. And a lot of handshake deals, but nothing concrete. But I was very lucky that through my career, because I was interested in media, I peppered myself with some media prep, and I put myself out there to do some live TV to see what it was like. Same with when it came to public speaking, and I had a couple of business interests which I was keen on pursuing, so I sort of tried to upskill myself in those and read up on that. So yeah, I found being a rugby player tough, because you've got to be a rugby player, and then when you're in a leadership role, you've got all the captaincy responsibilities that come with it. Then you've got planning for life after rugby, and then you've got a family. It's tough, but now it's paying dividends, because in 2 years' time now, I feel really settled and happy. I haven't had a single day since I've retired where I wished I was still playing. You know, I was definitely ready to finish. And the coaching was completely left field. I hadn't even planned to do any coaching, so that was something which came completely out of the blue, but something that I'm really enjoying. So I think being proactive in my playing days and trying to plant seeds for life after rugby. Now I look back, and it's such a boring bit of advice to give youngsters. But I look back now, and I'm so thankful that I did that.
And I think you've probably hit a nail on the head from the conversation we had on Monday, Sam, which is that we were saying about the watchers' experience, and you know, the keenness of what we want to do is to encourage the lads and girls as well, of course, because the sport is growing in both, probably faster in the girls' sport at the moment, but is having that plan. And it is boring in a way, but it's essential, because the majority of your life you're not playing. So therefore, you do need to think about the tomorrows, and stellar players like yourself and stellar players at the top end. So the George Fords, the Manu Tuilangis, they're still going to need to plan, but on a less scale, because people will want to invest on them. And we were talking about almost the next level down, the first teamers who are there week in, week out, but they're not the big names, is helping them in particular, because they haven't got perhaps the backing and the corporate support that perhaps, I'll say again, forgive me for coming to you, Sam, someone like yourself who has got that capability and that IP that's just that step above. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do think you're right. It's the players who aren't your first teamers. I'm not sure because I won't mention salaries, but we know there's a band of salaries of international players who are on a healthy salary, and it's your guys who are your second, third choice players. It's key for them who they need to plan. Because I remember I read a stat saying 75% of rugby players enter depression, some form of depression, whether it's mild or severe, when they finish playing. But I remember thinking, well, I think I entered that when I was playing, so I found it so stressful towards the end of my career. But I think that's because, and I appreciate, I was one of the lucky ones who had an international career. So you are financially better off. But it's the guys who are, which is the bulk of the professional rugby players out there who don't play international rugby, who are earning 40, 50, 60, 70,000, which is a great wage in the real world, but not when you're earning it for just 5, 6 years and then you're back out into the real world with no job. You've got to upskill yourself early. So I'm obviously still in contact with a lot of players. It's great to see guys now, loads of new startup businesses, planted seeds for life after rugby, whether it's anything in nutrition, or they want to become a PT, or they want to do property development, or they become a financial advisor. It's great to see them doing things now proactively when they're 23, 24, 25, So when that time does come, you can just flick that switch, turn off being a rugby player, enjoy a little bit of time at home, and reflect on that, and then move into the real world.
Brilliant. Phil, did you want to?
Yeah, it was one of the points Sam made is getting your priorities right, and that was again leading on from something that Tim mentioned on Mondays. Obviously, as you go along with your career, playing and coaching, your responsibilities change, and then obviously the things that you have to provide for your family changes, obviously. And I think that's a really good way of looking at it, Sam, is making sure you get your priorities right and having those conversations with the players, to make them understand that down the line things are going to be different. Excuse me, are potentially going to be different because of these reasons, and putting them into those positions there where they can plan accordingly so that they don't maybe get into that stressful situation. There's going to be a natural level of stress, I'm sure, as we all know, but I think making sure they understand that priorities will change, as more responsibilities come on them. And I think that's a really important point, actually.
It's like playing a game of rugby, though, and we all coach it when you play rugby. When you play a game of rugby, you've got to go out and make it happen. You can't just go out and play a game and expect to score a try in the first 10 minutes without putting an effort or putting yourself out there or taking risks. And it's exactly the same as life after rugby. It's not just going to fall into your lap. You've got to go out and make something happen. So I was on a phone call today with somebody who is a business partner I'm with now, and it's just a small venture that we've got. And there's like lots of little opportunities coming up. And I'm like, it might only be a 5-10 minute phone call if somebody's made a request, but make that phone call. 9 times out of 10, it might not come to anything, but the 1 time out of 10 that you did pick up the phone, it might come to something. So you've got to make something happen. You can't just expect it to happen. Same as playing a game of rugby, same as life after rugby as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Stephen Anderson, I'm going to come to you. Let's run around the world very, very quickly. How's it feeling over in Australia and New Zealand, for example?
We've been in lockdown for a few weeks, obviously. Out of the office for about 3, I think. So measures were pretty tough. And obviously that's impacted on every layer of the pathway, as it is for everyone around the world. Rugby Australia, the landscape's pretty tough. I was talking to Phil the other day about some of the issues, but we're going through a lot of, you talk about transition, there's going to be a lot of change, I think, as a result of what we're going through at the moment. But certainly some of the topics that we're talking about right now, I mean, the transitioning, I think that's a critical one that Sam mentioned before. It is like a game. I think I do a lot of work in leadership. My background's in performance psychology and sociology. So obviously I've incorporated a lot of those principles into my work, both as a coach and now as a facilitator around the high performance area. But certainly impressing upon the player that, life as a professional rugby player isn't the end. And it's very hard to convince a player that's 18, 19 that, debuts at Super Rugby level. I'm sure Sam can testify to this. It's very hard to convince a player to look long term and look past their career. So, without going into tin tacks, I developed a leadership model and program. There's 13 modules in it. Takes 26 weeks. Every person that comes in, every player that comes in the intake into the academy has to go through it. And we do talk about, life skills, the tools for life post-career. Are they thinking that? No, but certainly I've had a lot of players that have gone past the academy and graduated into pro footy and then gone into real life and actually recognised 10 years past that some of the lessons that we were teaching and some of the tools we've provided actually work. So there are light bulb moments. Inside the leadership program, we don't talk too much about, them or wanting them to understand exactly what's going on. As a 19-year-old, as an example, it's more about providing the information, making them aware of the demands and challenges. And we do draw a lot of parallels between the performance side of it and what is to be expected of them once they go into the real world of earning a living. So, I mean, just an awareness around the tools. You know, what are the life skills, and what are those tools that are associated with being part of society? And I think that's another major area, which I'm not going to talk about, but certainly living in the bubble. You know, professional sport these days has so many robust protocols and principles around what you can do, and I think Phil mentioned as well. You know, you live and die by the diary, the schedule, and then all of a sudden they transition into work, and my God, you know, what's going on? No one's telling me what to do here. I've got to actually be self-driven. I've got to own and be accountable and be responsible. So it's important those lessons are translated in some form, as I keep mentioning awareness, through our, well, we certainly do through our pathway program and academy programs, but it's an ongoing process, and it should be catered for, and I'm sure it is today in most programs. You know, that we talk well-being and welfare, but certainly the key to it was leadership. I think also, just one final point, I mean, I transitioned from a pro league player to professional coaching in Australia in 1993. I was 29 going on 30. I didn't have anyone there to help me. So I had to learn on the run. And at the moment, it's as far as coach development and transitioning between playing and coaching, we do a lot of coach mentoring, obviously, and that's one of the support mechanisms we draw on our past careers, which is what effectively we're doing here today. But there's transitions in a whole scope of different areas inside pro rugby that I think we're only just starting to scrape the surface of. Very, very big area, transitioning.
Thank you, Stephen. And you towards the end there got to exactly where I was going to come to as well, which is we were talking there a lot about playing staff and athlete participation, but actually coaches are as at risk of these situations as players, of course. So you're absolutely right that yes, there's the transition from player to coach, but coaching staff have to perform and have to present and all the rest. And Phil can probably jump in better. Because results-driven businesses are ruthless. Therefore, as a coach, you have to have that planning and that understanding and that capability just as much.
I think it's, you know, taking Sam's point, Steve's point about, you know, lessons learned, making sure that, you know, people do understand that they do, you know, need to plan, and they will accrue certain, you know, skills during their playing careers, and get them in a position where they can understand how to use those transferable skills that they grow during, you know, during rugby, and the advice they get of people they trust, etc. And it's the same in coaching, Steve, as we've discussed previously. It's, you know, the reflection piece for coaching is so important, and it's not just, you know, reflecting when you lose and reflecting when you win. It's having a really good balance in that area in order to learn the lessons and then to, you know, develop new skills moving forward. So, you know, some really good points there from playing and coaching, or playing to coaching and coaching as you go along. Sorry, your coaching journey.
Yeah.
So I've got no hair.
What? Just so I know in sport. So, Andre, I'm going to come to you. Obviously, you've been to some very luxurious places with your career, and now in Doncaster. Not sure how that works, but how's it from a South African perspective?
Yeah, I mean, just listening to the guys that's been talking, I mean, I agree with Phil. You know, being a rugby player, I mean, everything is done for you. You pretty much know 2 weeks in advance what you're going to do at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, what you're going to have for breakfast, what you're going to have at training. So everything is done for you. All you need to do is look after yourself, make sure that your body is in a fit, healthy state to perform whatever is expected from you. And all of a sudden, that's been taken away from you via you retiring or injury or whatever. I'll come to the injury part. So yeah, that was a big transition. And all of a sudden to realize you wake up in the morning and you don't have to go to the gym. You know, you're like, shit, what's going on? What do I have to do? Do I have to run to the kitchen to get myself a cup of tea? And because your body is so conditioned to keep training, and all of a sudden you don't have to. So with my transition, what I did is you so often see these old guys, they retire, and then 6 months down the line, they're itching at the bit to try and make a comeback. And then they do make a comeback, and then they make it worse. So I said to myself, I don't want to be one of those. So when I decided to retire in 2007 at Leeds, I basically took a year, 18 months break completely from rugby. I didn't watch rugby. I didn't talk rugby. I didn't coach. I did nothing, absolutely nothing. But in that time, I hooked up with one of my friends who had a construction business, and he taught me a lot of ways how to do network, how to basically manage a project in construction and stuff like that. Because what I saw growing or playing during my career, I was fortunate to be one of those players who started as an amateur and went through the transition in 1996 to professional. So we had to basically, we knew we're not going to get money for playing. We did a little brown envelope on a Friday afternoon, but that wasn't enough to sustain your life. So we knew we had to do something else for after rugby. So that's why a lot of the players my age, we had to go and study. We had to get a degree, a diploma, or some sort of education so you can go and apply for a job after rugby. Nowadays, I see youngsters, they go straight from school, straight into academy, straight into professional rugby. They've got no education around. They've got no, some of them do, some academies do offer some sort of education, a marketing degree or an advertising degree or a business degree, but a lot of them don't. So this poor kid, when he's finished with rugby, he's got nothing, no degree behind him. So he's relying on people, on his network, not so much his degree. So he's relying on people they trust and a friend of a friend and those kind of things. So basically he's been still guided, but he could be misguided. So that is my problem. I would like to see the youngsters get education behind them. So when they do leave the world of rugby, they can say, you know what, I've got a degree in marketing. Now they can use their network and connect with somebody that he can actually use his degree, not just, thumb suck and say, okay, cool, teach me how to do it. No, then it's too late. You got to get a degree before. And then hand in hand with that, come back to the injury part. I mean, as you know, you can play and you can prepare as much as you like. You never know when that injury is going to happen. And that's what happened to me in 99. I mean, I had everything planned out and I had my severe ankle injury just before the 99 World Cup, and everything was taken from me. The playing privileges, the World Cup was taken, the insecurity, everything was gone. And the doctor basically said to me, you're done for at least a year. So what do you do for a whole year? You're not playing, you've got no income, you've got the unsurety of getting back. Are you going to be playing again? And that is what you need to prepare for. Not necessarily always after rugby. Is what do you do during rugby as well? Because that can happen you can run onto the pitch and within the first minute with a kickoff, your ACL can go or your knee can break or anything can happen and you're done. What then? It's all good and well saying prepare for after rugby. It's what you're doing during rugby as well. And once again, when I started playing professional in 96, we didn't have the advice, these kind of things that we're doing today on a chat where people network on video chat and giving advice. And so we didn't have that. We didn't have people coming to us and say, invest your money this way or do this or do that. What we had was people taking advantage of us because we didn't have the experience. They would say, oh, invest your money in this and invest your money in this health insurance and life insurance and all that stuff. And we didn't know the better because all we wanted to do is play rugby. We didn't want to worry about all those other things. And a lot of guys got burnt. And when they opened their eyes and they finished their career, they didn't have any money left because all their money was invested in the wrong places. Because nobody guided us at the time, because it was such a quick transition from amateur to professional. But one morning you wake up, you're still an amateur, and the next morning you wake up, just because you sign on a dotted line, you're a professional. The only thing that changes is your bank statement. But I mean, you're still an athlete. You still have to go and train. But nobody taught us how to be a professional athlete. What do you have to look for? What's the next step? What do you have to look at? Financial wise, family wise, your future. Nobody taught us that. Only later in the process, I would say, closer to the 99s, the 2000s. That's when the agents started jumping on the bandwagon, and they started giving advice to us players how to manage your money and all that stuff. But those first 2 years was absolutely hell, because like Sam said, as a youngster, you're 22, 23-year-old, you got all this cash. What do? You're bored. You start buying watches and jet skis, and you start doing all this stupid stuff because you want to look cool and you want to be the favorite boy on the team and the girls love you and all that shit. But at the end of the day, it doesn't help you for your future. And that's where hopefully today we as coaches can, like Stephen said, we can mentor them and tell them, listen, yes, you're 19 years old, but what's going to happen if you're 20 years old and you get an injury? What's going to happen? What future do you have? So yeah, that's just from my point. I mean, it's tough, and I'm glad that now there are forums, so to speak, that we can help the kids, and hopefully they listen, because all they want to think is play footy. So hopefully they listen, and we as role models, we can guide them.
Brilliant, thank you. Really insightful, and lots to take in there. So thank you for that. Bernard, I'm going to come to yourself. Obviously, you've gone the full transition into business. How's it been, and what's your thoughts?
It's been a lot easier than coaching, to be honest. A 9-to-5 job is it's a different story. Obviously, you got to work hard at the start to pick up the knowledge. But I think for me, for this time in my life, my daughter's 13, my son is 11. We just need to give them some stability. So I just needed to get a job that would give us stability, and it was really interesting going to the job market as an unqualified person in reality, having spent so long playing or coaching. But what I found out there was there's a massive need at the moment for coaching and mentoring. Dublin at the moment is a hub for all the big tech companies: Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, YouTube, etc. And they're finding, they've always hired the best of the best, the brightest young people, people from other tech companies. And the reality is, when it comes to management or coaching, they sometimes struggle with that. And even though they have leadership programs and coaching programs, because they've come with a real, I suppose, individual background about being brilliant at the technical side of it, or being the best in their class in Harvard, when they migrate to being managers at 35, 36 or 40, they lack that empathy and coaching and being able to build a team and I suppose build resilience and help people who have issues. So for me, I was shocked at the fact that I didn't have the stereotypical 20 years in a career or in an office wasn't an issue. People now are looking for people like us who, obviously from a playing point of view, you've got a unique set of skills, but from a coaching point of view, you have another set of skills about being able to manage other people and being able to deal with that pressure and be able to work long hours. And the market pre-COVID-19, was much more open to coaches than probably players, because a lot of players struggle with transition. They struggle to deal with that, monotony of 9 to 5, whereas as coaches, we're used to working 6 to 9, or Sundays, weekends aren't off. So we have a unique skill set that's different than ex-players. Some of us have played and coached, so we've got both. But I certainly felt that employers were very open to looking at bringing someone with my profile into their organization. And I actually managed to have a choice. Now, having said that, I networked really hard. I mean, I went on LinkedIn and I looked at Google and I said, who do I know in there? And if I didn't know anybody, I just found someone high up and sent them a message saying, look, my name is Bernard Jackman. This is my background. I'm transitioning out of playing and coaching. I'd love to meet you for coffee and chat about your journey. And some people replied and some didn't, but you need to be brave and cheeky. And the ones that did reply, even if they didn't offer me a job, pointed me in the right direction for for something else and are now part of my network. So I think networking is really important. I think there's been huge development in terms of helping players prepare for the future. And this is great, the start of this, but there's not a lot of help with coaches. And coaches are in a much worse position. Sometimes, you don't want to move your family. Sometimes, there's not another opportunities there and then to get back into another job straight away. And we don't have the time on a Wednesday to go spend time with a corporation, but it's really important that we are planning for what could happen next. And yeah, just continue to build your network and continue to make a really good impression with everyone you come across by being professional and by having a good charisma and being a good bloke. So that was my transition. It wasn't as scary as I thought it was going to be. I enjoyed the process. Learning new skills, that's not new for us. You just got to get stuck into it. And while being an ex-player and having a media profile or ex-coach opens the door, after 5 minutes, when they move on to what you're trying to sell or what you're trying to bring, I mean, that's gone. So it's great for opening doors, but you have to actually learn a new set of skills. And to be honest, I don't think any of us would struggle with that. I mean, it's just a case of deciding what you want to get into.
Thanks, Bernard. Sorry, I was talking to myself on mute there, which doesn't help. Phil, have you got something to add at that point before I pass over to?
Yeah, it's just a really good point, that Bernard makes. I think one of the things I did when I left the Blues, before I got involved with Cardiff Blues, and I was director of rugby there when Sam was playing, I did a similar thing, Bern, to what you did. I networked a bit, and I met a guy called Graham Wilson at the Success Factory in Chester. And he's had a leadership and training company for years. He's military background, started working commercially with DuPont. And we created a program called the Leadership Athlete. And the idea was basically to, talk about leading self, leading others, and the links between business and sport. And one of the very first projects we did, taking your point on board, why corporate people, sometimes look at us coaches, was we did some work with Network Rail, Keltbray and Murphy's after the Carillion crash a few years ago, and they were charged with building the Transpennine link between Manchester and Leeds, and they'd never ever been in a room together, and the project was 18 years old when we did that, And what we found, they were great at managing a process of obviously the program or the project, sorry, but they weren't very good at leading their people. They were telling them what to do rather than guiding and supporting. And I think your point is excellent, mate. It's really, really, really important. And again, that's using your network, as Sam has said, as everybody has said, using your network, putting yourselves out there and understanding the skills that you developed as a coach, and then how you can use those skills to benefit others.
Just a simple thing. I went for a job at Google, and they've got eight interviews before they offer you the job. Like it's incredible. But like a simple thing like an IDP, individual development plan. I mean, Google, who are supposed to be like, one of the most intelligent and new-minded companies in terms of developing people. When I showed them IDPs from rugby, and how that can be a really good way of improving people's skill set, they were all over it. And like, so the things that we take for granted as being, not rocket science, when you can go and say, look, historically, I've sat down with my players on a monthly basis, and, the IDP form part of their individual development program. That kind of skill set and understanding is valuable, and we have it. We just need to be better at selling it.
Yeah, I agree. It was something we did with the Namibian boys, for example. They were brilliant kids to coach, but they weren't very self-driven at times and not very well, not self-reliant. So we did a diagnostic with them called Strength Finder, which helped them, understand or develop their self-awareness, and that was good. And reading Sam's book the other day, Sam, you did that Myers-Briggs profiling, didn't you, when you were playing?
The WRU did quite a bit for all the players, so I think it more than anything it gave people the confidence to go out and do something. But they did quite a little bit of personality test. I think they went around every single player, or anyone who wanted. They offered it to every single player anyway. Yeah, but they did that sort of stuff as well.
those type of things are important, and getting people to to understand when that goes on in sport and how we can transfer it, and show the importance of it to help develop the individual, because everybody wants to have a sense of value. They want to feel that they belong somewhere, and they have a level of control and safety. And the more learning and knowledge you can provide them with, the more confident they'll develop.
Just to add on to that, Phil, is like the problem that I had when I went to America to coach there. You're coaching an athlete that's not really interested in life, well, making rugby a life, kind of say, or make rugby a business. They basically just play rugby for a hobby. You're dealing with an athlete that's obviously amateur. He doesn't get paid $1. So his aspirations or his drive is not the same as the kid in South Africa or in the UK or Australia, New Zealand. So it was difficult to keep those kids motivated, because they were just like, hey, I just want to play a game and afterwards have a few beers and move away. So I must say it was really difficult for me to make that what you can call it, the managing of the team, to try and motivate them and to try and steer them in a direction for life after rugby, because all of them already had a life after rugby, because they were proper amateur. They didn't receive $1 from rugby, so they already had jobs. They already set for life after rugby. They used rugby as, like I say, enjoyment. So it was difficult for me to manage them or to guide them or to mentor them, because they would always just say to me, but coach, we just want to have fun. As soon as I bring the professional aspect into the game or into the environment, they were just like sort of shooting it down. So I had to adapt to, instead of making it like a professional environment, I had to create a family environment where because that's what they want. They want to come and play a game, have a few beers, have a barbecue or whatever, and then move away. So I had to change my outlook as a coach, turning it from managing the players to create a family environment where the players bring their family and they want to say, you know what, I want to go play rugby because afterwards I'm going to do some network with my mates. They don't want to do network for business. They were not interested in that. They were interested in having a good laugh with their mates. So that to me was very difficult to keep it professional as a coach on the rugby field, but then off the field, be a family environment, create that family environment, which I think we really did with the help of my wife. We really created a really great environment for them. The players loved it. The club really grew significantly. We created, a few scenarios with the players so that they can reach out to other players, and the numbers in the club grew because everybody wanted to go and play at this club because it was such a fun environment to be in. They were not worried about life after rugby, so that was quite a challenge for me.
Good point,
Really
mate.
interesting.
It's a very good point. Very interesting. It's like, if you remember, Andre and Tim and Hoggy were at Leeds when we were there, and we never had the big budgets, taking your point on board, and we had to try to create little points of difference. And one of the biggest things we did, it didn't affect you at the time, by the way, but when we created up a creche we created a creche for families, we remember,
yeah, before
and during matches, which was hugely important. Made the players, and particularly their wives, feel special, which was good. So all those little things are very, very important.
No, absolutely. Because I mean, at the end of the day, you as a player, the last thing you want to worry about is whether your kids and wife are they sitting in the right place? Do they have tickets? I mean, you just want to focus on your game. So if you can take away that added pressure or stress for a player by managing his family life and stuff in and around the club, that makes a huge impact on the actual player. So yeah, that definitely help.
Right. Tim, I'm going to come to you, if I may, just to talk about the business of you and what we've thought about World After Sport wise.
Yeah, it's great listening to all the stories and insight. We came up with the concept of the business of you, which for me is about making sure it's the same as, you're calling it an individual development plan, but running in parallel almost. This is my professional sporting business, but also this is my personal development business, and I've got a plan for both. And I believe, you know, Andre talked about what happens when you get injured, but all you should be able to do is say, when I'm fit and healthy, I can play and I can focus 100% on delivering on a weekend. But then as soon as I'm injured or as soon as I've got any downtime, I should be just as committed to my personal development plan, and knowing that this is just as important. And I wish, you know, Steve, are there any stats that actually prove that by having commitment, and yours is mandatory, I think, into the academy, but having a commitment in that personal development plan for life after sport actually improves the performance level on a Saturday? Because that, for me, would fundamentally change the motivation of the director of rugby or the funding behind the player. But for me, I was that player's rep. I did most of you don't really know me, but I did an anthropology, sort of psychology degrees at university. I went to work at ICI, and before it was a professional game, and I was using the Myers-Briggs and the 360-degree feedback. So when I came into the game, I was making my mates sit down and listen to a financial advisor. But as the time moved on, the appetite of the player to bother, I just got labelled as boring. You know, like you said, Sam. I think you're talking about live slow and die old. It was so difficult to get the players. There was always some early adapters. There's always some conscientious guys. I think like the people on this call. But then there's many people that just want to buy trainers, and they're not interested. They just want to go and, you know, sell Viagra if it's Leeds, or drink coffee. And you know who we're talking about. But for me, it's how do we reach out to the player? In my motivation, in my job now, I do the same as Bernard. Really, I'm using my network, and I'm a mentor, and I'm coaching in business, and I love it. But how do we get through to the player? And to motivate someone, you've got to find out what they need. And unfortunately, those 19, 20-year-old kids don't really know what they need. And so for me, it comes back to the education. Or if I come back to you, Steve, is it mandatory over in Australia? Do you make all those players sit down? And then is the education complete enough? Do they really believe it's in their own best interest?
Look, I'd like to say yes across the 5 provinces, but I'd have to say it's an indifferent take-up. And one of the areas I'm working on right now with Rugby Australia is to put the leadership program across every province in a generic modelling. And everything you've mentioned there, Tim, there are actually, I'll send you some studies on. It's social psychology, but there's some correlation between, you know, the conversion from pro sport into the skill sets from pro sport into the workplace. There are documents out there and journals, but certainly it's a critical area. I mean, Dylan will testify too as one of my staff. It's incredibly challenging right now, and for the life of me, I don't see the why they don't understand in the provinces the detail we need to go to. So I've been very individualistic with my work, even as a coach. There's nothing that we're talking about now that hasn't sort of hit a button with me. But I mean, even in a team environment, we're made up of many different characters. So you mentioned things like motivation. Incredibly important. We have to find out what motivates the individual, and it's not money. It's not. You can't just categorize and label. There are so many different things that turn a player on. They should all testify to.
Especially
so look, there's some great questions in there, Tim, around leadership. Particularly around the motivation side of it. But I just, you know, we're having a real challenge right now in Australian rugby to actually get this embedded inside our delivery inside an academy. So it's a big piece. It's a really big piece.
Well, this is the opportunity, hopefully, to work together, and I think people will listen to different sorts of evidence, be based on their personality, won't they? And having the evidence that says you'll make a more successful transition. We talk about the cliff at the end of your playing career. We want to try and build stability and on a mental level, on a financial level, even on a physical level. You want to make sure that you're ready for that transition. And Sam's done a brilliant job of preparing.
Sorry, Tim, just one final point on that I will add, and you just triggered something. I just want to get it out. I don't distinguish between the playing component and work. So I talk, a journey, and part of it is, and I mentioned it before around the skill sets and the tools, and I mentioned the word transition because it's the topic. But we need to get these players to understand that the bumps and the hurdles are incredibly important in terms of real life. The bumps meaning, we mentioned, I think Andre mentioned it, the preparation for a 20-year-old who has a really bad career-ending injury. How are we looking after that particular individual? Well, if we make them aware that this is just part of, it's going to be very, very hard for him to accept it, or she, to accept that this is the end. But I think when they come into the program, they need to be, education's the wrong word, they need to just understand that this is part of your journey in life. It's not the piece and then you move on to another piece. It's just, there's detours, but that's life. That's life. So longitudinal rather than compartmentalizing how we speak with our young players is incredibly important. Full stop. Don't start.
Steve, that's really insightful and really interesting, because I know you try to avoid the word education, but to be fair, we are educating ourselves day in, day out. And by talking to people and saying, like you said, your life journey is this. The fact that you're going through a sporting career, then maybe a business career like Bernard's gone through, or coaching careers, is you're still educating, you're still learning all the time. But I take exactly what you're saying. I think it's a really, really valid point to say that, sport is just a part of life, not a compartment of life.
Yes. I mean, I don't downplay it, but certainly it's inclusive of. So when they come into an academy or a pathway program, it's incredibly important to highlight and not prioritize that this is the be all to end all. And how we actually do that, there's a whole host of different methods we use. But look, we call it learning and education as part of our rugby program, and Dylan heads up that part. So I get frustrated sometimes with the fact that, and I understand what you're saying around the education and the mentoring. We're all doing that. We're all part of. But to me, it should be just a part of the journey. It's just one stop of many, as we all know, as we get older, that it's just one stop. And as I said, the 18 to 20-year-old in your pro academies, they don't want to hear that. They're just thinking about now. But eventually the information you provide, the experiences you provide, whether it's internal or external, and we do a lot of external as well, but they have to understand it. All you're doing there is providing a broader scope, and they're not going to understand it completely now. And as a facilitator or a teacher, that's quite difficult to manage because, and Dylan will testify to this too, because you want to see results. Well, I'm a coach, so I want results. But so it's been quite difficult for me to manage that component of it, that you're not going to get a result or a complete sell between you and the player or you and the athlete straight away. So the light bulb moment I spoke about before, invariably that comes a decade plus later. And they go, now we know what the bally-headed bloke was talking about.
Fabulous. Richie, I'm going to bring you in. I was trying to bring you in a bit earlier in this, but just wanted to let Stephen and Tim get their points across because I thought they were really important as well. What's your thoughts? Because I think you've got a few views on this as well.
Yes, it's really interesting. I think it's fascinating to listen to everybody's story around the transitions that they've made. And I think a lot of those things resonate quite deeply with me. My story's probably been slightly different to Andre, to Sam's. I'm not coming from a professional playing background. I'm coming from a semi-professional playing background in Wales. I played at a relatively good level, but always a goal of mine was to coach professionally, and that came through a really good sort of support service growing up, through family, through mentors. So I went through my pathway or my journey, as Steve just alluded to, through a teaching background. So I thought there'd be a pretty good correlation from going from a teaching field into potentially a coaching environment further along the line. And Sam said something earlier on making something happen. I was really fortunate back in 2015. I was working with the England counties under-20s, and we toured Hungary as a sort of end of season trip, and managed to have a few conversations with people that were involved in the Hungarian rugby union, and that sort of relationship grew over time. And a year down the line, then I was lucky that an opportunity presented itself to oversee and assist with the international rugby program in Hungary. And pretty challenging to start with, commuting over to Budapest. I found myself going over probably 2 or 3 times a month and spending a pretty prolonged period in a different country with not historically a rugby background or rugby environment. So it was pretty challenging for me, juggling that with a young family. But what I tried to do was to use some of my experiences from living in different countries. I'd lived in Belgium previously and done a lot of work excuse me, with their sort of international rugby teams there. But what I was tasked to do was to try and create a vision for the rugby union, and to try and provide a little bit of stability and a little bit of direction. And that took me 3 years to do. There were a couple of fundamental things that I wanted to try and get in place while I was there, and one of those was to try and develop a really good coach development structure, where the coaches could get experiences, could get educated, looking at other models that are used in different countries. So that was pretty successful over time. We looked at the player pathway. Prior to going to Hungary, they had nothing like an under 16, under 18, under 20s team. So we looked at creating something that would work for that country. But again, they had the vision of trying to be a culture of excellence. And Phil mentioned something earlier with the great stuff that he's done with Namibia. It's what their vision of excellence is compared to where we think it is, and they were almost polar opposite. So it was trying to shorten that gap. I think what really helped with me was having people on the ground in Hungary when I was back in the UK. And again, fortunately, there were 2 or 3 really good drivers in the Hungarian rugby union that were able to facilitate my job and make things run a lot smoother than probably what it was 3 years ago. And a bit of an anecdote that I talk a lot about is when we started, we played in our first Sevens tournament over in Milton Keynes, and it was a pretty high level tournament. From memory, I think Samurai were there. There were a couple of other invitational teams, and it was a 2-day tournament, and the Hungarians flew into Luton Airport on the Friday afternoon. We taxied them from Luton to Milton Keynes to find out that they'd not booked a hotel on the Friday night. So they ended up sleeping in the changing rooms of the rugby club in Milton Keynes. So it was really bizarre, and I thought, shit, what have I got myself in for? This is an international rugby team. But again, fast forward to the next day, and the players ended up winning the tournament. So it's amazing. And then again, three years further ahead, the Sevens team were playing in Colombia in the Olympic qualifiers against France and England. So we were able to draw upon those experiences, and I think for me, I learned hell of a lot, from that experience coaching, at a sort of tier 2, tier 3 country that I'm able to now draw upon with my current role, my full-time role at Cambridge. And probably the most important thing that I've learned over time is to be creative with the things like the budget that I've got. I've not got a huge budget to work with. I didn't have a huge budget at Hungary, but we managed again to build a culture and an environment built on sort of building relationships and connections with people, and that fortunately has filtered into what I'm doing at the moment with Cambridge. So it's been a pretty interesting journey. There's been a hell of a lot of challenges that I've faced over the last sort of 3 years, but I think what I have learned over that time period is you know, everything is built around having those positive relationships and positive connections with people. And again, the Hungarian experience, what it taught me was they probably weren't in need of a huge amount of tactical and technical knowledge, but actually giving trust in them in what they were doing and giving them some stability and probably more direction was what they needed. And you know, they're in a much stronger place than what they were three or 4 years ago. So yeah, really successful. But again, it's what it's showing me is that transition from that environment back into my, you know, my day-to-day environment at the moment. There's, you know, valuable lessons that, you know, that I've learned over time.
No mean feat. Wow, incredible. Yeah, I'm just picturing them all in a changing room.
Yeah.
So, Hoggy, I'm going to come to you because when we spoke on Monday, one of the key things you talked about was the youngsters, and I'm trying to build that onto where Stephen was talking earlier, because we were very much talking about, you know, youngsters today need to be talked to in a certain way, and perhaps it's not just about results, but about the future. Do you want to add anything? Any thoughts on from that?
No, just quickly, I think from my experience, I played international rugby while studying for a civil engineering degree, and played at high level, being a consultant civil. The game went professional when I was 95, 96, and I transitioned from an amateur playing decent level to pro rugby. And I thought wrongly, right, I've got to put absolute everything into rugby. I'm going to down everything. I'm going to down tools. I need to focus so I can be the absolute best I can be as a rugby player. Watch videos, put my feet up, rested, did extra training because I thought that was my focus. And it wasn't until about 4 or 5 years in, I realized it was actually having a detrimental effect on my performance. And I needed some sort of stimulus away from the game that gave me more balance within my rugby. And I'd be interested to see what Sam says or some of the current players, because I still think there's a window of opportunity in a professional schedule that there is. You're obviously your physical preparation and your rugby preparation, but your academic or work experience can sit alongside a pro program. And I actually think for the majority of players, that's a far better balance, and you become a better performer as well as leading on to transition. And I think it's trying to make a connection with young players that's valid. And I'm sure a lot of young players were like myself and saying, listen, I've got to focus 100% on rugby because I need this to work for me. And ultimately, I think that's a wrong philosophy. I think you need a balance in your life that gives you success in the sport environment, but also leads on to the next thing. And I think you can run it concurrently, whether that's business, whether it's education. You can run it alongside a full-time professional program.
Fab. And that builds to something that Jonathan Davis said on Monday, which is if the youngsters have a plan of where do I want to be when I'm 31, do I want to stay playing rugby? Do I want to go on? And also builds on other things as well, I guess, is having that understanding of where you want to get to actually will alleviate and take away some of the pressure that rugby or that sport brings. Because at the end of the day, you know, like you said, sport is everything, but having something else in your life actually might take those pressures away a little bit.
I think, Mark, it's how we sell that message and who sells the message that's critical. Because I've sat as a player, people coming in and saying, oh, have a look at this, and nah, that's not for me. I want to focus on rugby. It's how we make that connection and who makes that connection that's really critical. But because I think almost every professional player has seen it in some guys over the last 20 years. But it's who and how we get that message across to the next generation.
Absolutely. Sam, there was a question in there. Sorry, I should have perhaps come to you as well. There was a question in there from Hoggy to yourself. Is what's your thoughts on portraying a message to the current playing world? How do you think we could perhaps get the message across, or help get the message across to players and to clubs, of course, that thinking about the future?
I think Hoggy's spot on. Yeah, he's spot on with. I remember I was at a corporate event and somebody was like, "Oh, how?" It's like, "Oh, I'm working like 7 days a week, 12-hour days. I don't know how to switch off and blah blah blah." And I was chatting to another golfer, a professional golfer. We were both using the same sort of sports site guy. And so there's one example in the business world, one example in the sporting world, and they just lived and breathed what they did. And I was chatting to the golfer, and then I remember the golfer said, "Oh, what do you have up in your house?" And we said, "Well, I got nothing. I haven't got a single. I mean, in my garage, I've put up some stuff where I train, but in my house where I live, I've had people give me lovely canvas prints of me playing and all these sorts of things. I got nothing up in the house. It'd be the worst episode of Through the Keyhole you've ever seen, because when I go home, I don't want to be Sam, the ex-rugby player or coach or whatever. I'm Sam, the dad, and being able to rest or switch off is as important as being able to work. So I make sure I keep that balance. I see young players now, and Carl's probably thinking of probably similar examples. I'm just thinking anything, like you even just get out and walk the dog, mate. Get a dog, or you need to move out with, like, there's guys who live at home with their parents who don't have a girlfriend, don't have a dog, don't have any extracurricular educational type things to do. And I'm like, oh, that's not healthy for you mentally, and that's why for me, like, making sure I love being able to go home and not be a rugby guy. So when it's come past 5 o'clock, I'm not looking at any analysis or anything like that. I'm just going to be a dad, and then I can look at other things, like whether it's property or get out and walk my dog every day in an hour, of just be at one with nature for an hour and just don't do anything, just to be able to take yourself away. So when you do go back to that environment, you're going to be much more productive. So getting that message across the play is going to be so important, because otherwise you get to, I was the same. I was like, I'm not going to enjoy a 10-year career. When I was young 20s, I was thinking this. I can't do this for 10 years if I'm going to put this much pressure on myself all the time. And it's because I was just constantly living and breathing rugby. As soon as I had a family, I had a dog, I had a couple of like little ventures I had to worry about. It was a great natural distraction from actually playing rugby. So I do go back into a rugby environment, you're 100% focused again. So being able to rest is as important as being productive in itself and doing something. So you've got to be disciplined and giving yourself time off, and then you're going to be a lot more productive when you do have your time on. But getting that message across is key. And I guess the more current players are, ideally players who are playing the game and doing it, they're going to be the ones who they're going to listen to. I was thinking about what we were saying before about getting players to plan when they're 19, 20. That's the equivalent of getting someone perhaps our age, from a psychological point of view, doing a will. We don't want to think about a will or doing a will, but just like a player doesn't want to think about retiring. But that's the kind of understanding we need to have when you're talking to a 19-year-old player. They perceive life after rugby like we perceive writing a will. So, but then when you get a family, you realise the importance of that. So it's finding out, like Tim said, what motivates them. Why would they want to plan? Now I'm planning because I got long term, got 5 years, 10 years, 30 years. I want to be in an amazing position to be able to hand down to my daughter, and I got another child on the way. So they're both in a good position. I want to set them up. That's my long-term motivation. But everyone's different. What motivates them, and then that'll get them to make the right decision.
Brilliant.
And I think, Martin, just to follow on that, if there was some sort of study, say the most successful players in the Premiership or Pro 14 that have actually got longevity and business interests or academic interests away from the sport, because if I'm listening to you, Wobby, in the back of my mind as an average player, I'm going, yeah, but that's all right for Wobby because he's world class. He can afford to do that. If I'm Joe Bloggs, I still need to stay on the straight and narrow, which isn't right, by the way, but that's the psychology of an average player saying, right, I've got to make it work. I've got to make it work. My best mate's a guy called Doddy Weir, you'll be aware. Weirdo was horizontal. Mate, just did his training, did his bit, buggered off, went away back up to the farm. And his work-life balance was so much horizontal, it was incredible. But when he came to play the game, he could hit heights that was just incredible. But I always thought he was wrong and I was right. And ultimately he was right because he had that balance. But I think if it's average players have that balance as well, would be a really good education tool for the majority of players.
And I think the message I'm getting across here, Hoggy, is absolutely that. Is what I'm hearing from everyone speaking here is having that interest outside of sport gives you that perspective in life almost. And if we think about the amateur era versus the professional, the amateur era did give you that opportunity to have a little bit of an outside looking in, whereas at the moment you're more inside looking out. So I think there's a really key study there to be played that would really open the eyes of current athletes. I'm going to come to Mark Holman, if I may, just very briefly. Mark, obviously as a non-athlete, welcome, Jonathan. You in your PJs again?
No.
So Mark, I'm going to just come to you as a non-athlete, but you obviously speak to a number of rugby players and footballers, etc. What's your thoughts on what was going through today's conversation?
I just want to say, I just think it's great to have a group together, because I'm sure as playing, when you come off the pitch, the last thing you do is sit down and speak about transition to other people. And there is a network within, right there, right at that club, from sponsors to everyone. And Steve's point about having a program is so good, and it would be lovely for the sponsors to have something engaging. And I don't know if that happens within the club, and even going to get a bit of work experience or something small, because we never know when it's going to happen, and there's nothing like experience of going out into a job and just seeing what it's like and just having that bit of a wake-up call.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if that happens currently with players.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'm hoping, obviously, with World After Sport and with other businesses that are the same as, our mantra is to give the support, the advice, the encouragement, but also the practical capabilities for going out there and saying, well, I was talking to a guy at the England Legends game only a month ago, 6 weeks ago, and he was saying, I always had this ambition to become a stockbroker when I'd finished sport. And he's got into it, and he said, I hit my achievement, but I don't enjoy it, but I don't know what to do about it. And I just said, look, let's have a conversation, because if there's ways I can help open doors, give you understanding, opportunity, examples of what other things there are out there. As an athlete, you go straight from school to sport. You might just not know what's out there, and it's about us bringing people together. So, from my perspective, it's opening eyes, and it's giving people that understanding and help. And Johan, I'm conscious you've got the little one in your arms, behaving incribly well, probably better than us, to be fair.
I actually just gave him to my wife now, because he was just
side pass, yeah. I hope there wasn't a forward pass going on there, but from your side as a commentator and a new dad, what's your thoughts?
Well, one thing that I found particularly interesting is this idea of making sure that you've got other interests and just something to keep your mind busy as a professional rugby player. Obviously, I've never been in that position, but I know for myself, I needed to get to know myself, even as a professional sports broadcaster, I needed to have other interests, because as soon as I went to a game, I did commentary, I went home, I watched more rugby, eventually it gets a little bit monotonous and you don't enjoy it anymore. So I've really enjoyed those insights. And I'm making a lot of notes, because I'm currently planning a PhD study in sports psychology, just to find out what makes people successful. And at the moment, the thinking was to look at the relationships that you've had as a child growing up, and how that manifests later on in life, and the relationships that you have with your coach, and the relationships that you have with your family members and your teammates, how that impacts your being successful as a rugby player and just a professional sportsman in general. But another question that I wanted to ask, and I don't know everybody's backstories, but I know Phil Davies in particular, and his wife seems to be playing a very important role in his life as well. Because one thing that I've realized, especially with some of the coaches that I've met, is that they struggle to, it sounds like, balance that life between being a professional rugby coach and having a good family as well, or not a good family, but a successful family. And Phil seems to be managing that quite well, because I know a number of, in particular, sevens coaches who at some point the family just says you need to choose, either you're going to continue coaching, or you need to choose between, or you need to choose us as your family. So I'm quite interested to hear from Phil how he's managed to have that balance as a rugby coach, and somebody who's able to have that successful family life as well. Because I think if you look at it holistically, the family plays a key role in making a player successful and making a family successful, and a coach successful one day as well.
I think I told you too much, you Andre. No, I think I think where I've been lucky really is the support network that I had when I was starting to play rugby. I had two very influential school teachers at primary school, and then going on to secondary school. Then a club coach, and then a club coach at my village club, and then a really influential coach at Llanelli, Gareth Jenkins, who many of the guys will know. So the support network's very, very important. And I was lucky when Jonathan and I met each other. First of all, we played our first cap for Wales together, and then the following season, I think we played Scotland, and we were going back to the Angel because we were rooming together, and I met this crazy blonde girl who was shouting at him all the time. So I was quite interested to know who that lady was. And it was, of course, his sister who then became my wife. So, I was very lucky from an early age that I had a family who were very supportive and very understanding of rugby. And that's continued during the course of my career, where the kids were younger with us when we were in Leeds. They're now they're now in their 30s. We have a granddaughter. But everybody's very, very supportive of what I've tried to do, and I've always tried to include them in decisions that I make, whether I'm going to coach in Llanelli or Cardiff or Leeds or indeed go to Namibia. That was the most difficult conversation I think I had, that I was going to spend 20 odd weeks of the year over in Southwest Africa, which is great for me, but maybe not so good for the family. But I think the support network and trying to balance that and support each other. And one of the big things I found is when I was coming home after long periods away, I wasn't able to take over again. I was required to blend in and just be part of the family and get told by my 5-year-old granddaughter what to do. So that's quite humbling in many ways. But I think the support network, the understanding that you build up through that, the need to compromise at times, and be very thoughtful about the people who are sometimes staying at home when you're off, gallivanting around the world. So I've been very lucky, I think, to have a really strong and understanding support network, through my family in particular. Over the last sort of 20 years, that have 25 years now, I think. Steve's a little bit ahead of me on 27 years coaching, but as I'm one of the older guys as well, yeah. So been lucky to have that support network is vital, and have a balance and an understanding of others within that, I think, is very important.
Jonathan, I'm going to come to you if I may next. Conscious you were late joining because of other commitments, but thank you ever so much for dialing in. Have you got anything to add? Because I know I did touch earlier on your when you're 31 having an understanding, but obviously we've talked there about family being a key part. Any views from you?
I've only just come on late, so I don't know what's been going on previously, but yeah, family is always important because it keeps you a perspective on things, because you live in a bubble. So I think the main thing for me was family-wise was just when I went rugby league, was to make sure that they were all looked after first and foremost, with doctors and whatever went on in the house. We had to make sure that instead of ringing you, they'd have someone to ring and they'd be comfortable at home, because as everyone said, you're away for long hours, traveling, away on weekends as well. So when something goes wrong, you need them to be happy that they can sort it out while you're away. So I think it's vitally important they understand that they're part of that team, because with if there's issues there, you can't focus on what you do properly. So it's very, very difficult. So I've always been lucky as well. I've been supportive, and I've always engaged with them and on all my decision making. So I'm always talking to them when things are down, rather than leaving things fester. You just got to get out in the open, and it's not the easiest thing to come to do sometimes, but it's I think it's always easier at the end, get it out of the way. So it's I think it's vitally important.
Thank you. So Dylan, I'm trying to go around, make sure I include everyone in the call if I can. So Dylan, again over in Australia, working with Stephen and co. what's your thoughts on transition and family, etc., from what we've discussed so far?
Yeah, I guess the transition has really hit home with me. I came from a background that was more club footy, that went into, I was an electrician by trade, spent 8 years as an electrician, then moved to the UK. And when I moved to the UK, you talk about networks, and there's quite a bit of luck, I think, in networks, but meeting good people. I got the opportunity for the club that I was playing out was to go into the Saracens DPP program, working within their pathway, because the elite backs coach for the Saracens Academy at the time happened to be the club coach. So getting introduced to those type of networks early on just converted me into thinking this actually what I want to do as a job and as a career, and go into coaching. And in 2015, that's why I made that transition to leave the tools behind, and then I've been a coach since then, since 2015. And I think when we talk about mentoring from a player point of view, when we talk about the young guys coming through, to get that from above, as in mentoring from a coach point of view, it's hit and miss. Like I've been lucky to have Steve Anderson there, and he's been able to mentor me through, I guess, years and years of experience that he's had. And just hearing all you guys talk and your guys' journeys is really motivating to hear everyone where they've been and all the different experiences that they've been able to draw upon. So, with that, one of Hoggy's points was around how do the players itself, you sat in a room and you found it hard to sort of an external to come in and try to change your way of thinking. Just through experience from the academy boys, the consistency of the program being week to week with Ando's education, I think that's where we start to see the actual consistency, build a bit of habits and build the awareness that this stuff actually works, and they start to hit those light bulbs that Ando was talking about. So I think if we can get programs ingrained into our systems around the off-field stuff and about all the different education from a leadership point of view that draws upon so many other, I guess, skills that they can then use within rugby, you see the effect over time. And it's really encouraging to see them had that light bulb spark up, because then all of a sudden then I see it out in the field, and it makes a massive difference. And especially around their communication, we had a lot of young guys that were basically mutes when they first come into the academy and didn't know how to talk to each other, didn't know how to talk to I guess, coaches. But through the work that Ando's been able to do, you start to see it now in the field, and their confidence just builds from there. So that's how I feel that there is definitely an opportunity to keep progressing players through extended programs, and not just having it as a one-off where someone comes in, gives them a speech, and then you go away again. You might come back in another 2 months, 3 months time and try to do it again. So that consistency is key. And it was really, I guess, enlightening what Sam, you said about how we can't expect these players to try think long-term when us as, I guess, myself as a 30-year-old has never thought about writing out a will. So putting myself in now the players' shoes and going, okay, I'm telling them to think long-term, think outside of rugby. But for myself, as a 30-year-old, I haven't thought about anything past me trying to be an aspiring professional coach. So that was a really good, I guess, point to make me think how I can put myself in the players' shoes about that.
Cheers, Dylan. Sam's just apologising because we're all talking about family here. He's had to, his wife's got an appointment at 11:30, so he's going to have to hold the fort, as he said. So just thanking everyone for the discussion, and just apologising to you, Dylan, for shooting off a little bit earlier. So, yeah.
No problem. No problem.
Nice one, mate.
I just want to make a point on what Dylan and Hodgie and Mark said. I mean, we all talk about how we're going to get this message to these players. Well, we talk about players that are professionals, so you're working with them from 9 till 5, assumingly. Could there be a possibility that you bring them into a room and you talk to them and say, right, part of your contract with the academy or part of your contract with the club is to go to companies and be an apprentice for an hour or 2 hours a day. That, first of all, gets them out of the rugby mode. It gives them something else to think of. As Sam would say, walk the dog, get away from rugby. After lunch from, say, 1 o'clock until 3 o'clock, go to companies that are involved in the club, sponsorships, go there on an apprenticeship. So it doesn't cost the company any money. But at the same time, the player gets educated. He sees what it looks like in a real working environment, whether it's an advertising company, whether it's a marketing company, whether it's an engineering company, and just be there. And then obviously have a relationship with these companies that are linked to the club that could also mentor these players at a different level. So they hear a different voice, not always the same coaching voice. And it's not a once-off, as Dylan said, it's not a once-off where they sit in a room and they just listen once-off. It's an ongoing thing. So you say to the player, right, get consistency, get that message every week, every second week, force the players. It's part of your contract to go to this company. You're going to be working with them for 2 hours to see what it looks like in real life, how to do marketing or something like that. Would that be an option?
And if I may jump in there, Andre, I think that's a very valid point. And I perhaps bring Hoggy in a little bit here, because Hoggy and I had this, we had this very conversation on Monday, and we've also had it via email since Monday about the culture shift and the importance, like you've just said, of outside rugby and encouraging players to do that. And again, what I'm hoping personally, and I guess selfishly, is that World After Support can be a company that facilitate those kind of things, because it's a lot of effort sometimes to get sponsors or companies to engage. So what I want to do, and I'm passionate about doing, is opening those kind of doors for players and coaches that say, like you've just said, between 1 and 3 every Tuesday, you will be going to X company to learn about, all the different departments. Perhaps we set up an apprenticeship where you don't just learn about marketing, but you learn about everything that a company does. Because a company can, I've worked in banking for years, and when I was in a branch, I didn't have a clue what else went on. But once I took that transition myself to head office and went, wow, look, there's marketing, there's products, there's legal, there's compliance, there's all these different things, I got to open my eyes to my future opportunities. And if a player knows and then tries those things, then maybe they'll go, wow, I really enjoyed that. That might be where I start to spend more time. Building that relationship with companies as well means that there's a chance that that company could employ you at the end.
Yeah, because they know you, they've worked with you, they trust you,
and they've trained you.
Exactly, and they basically taught you exactly the way they groomed you to fit their needs. Maybe I don't know. It's just a thought.
Brilliant. And I've just had a note from Dylan to say that the NRL have a policy where they do encourage this kind of thing 2 days a week. So that's fantastic. And if we could help clubs in the UK and obviously elsewhere, this is not just about the UK but globally, is we can encourage that kind of thing in sport, then fantastic. But as we've already said in the conversations throughout today, the challenge is opening people's eyes to that and encouraging that culture shift, and encouraging that kind of mentality, especially in players, of course, because as we said earlier, their view is, I've done my training, I want to go home, or I want to go to the golf course, whatever. And it's very easy to do that. The challenge is to encourage them to do something perhaps a little bit more ambitious, a little bit more creative, and obviously a little bit more long term.
Martin, if I could jump in there and say
that
if we can collaborate globally, obviously there's so much good energy, great ideas. It offers maybe more credibility going into our various regions of the world. But also we haven't really talked about COVID-19 and the fact the world has changed and will never go back to being what it was. And there are so many people, I think, will be having to live a semi-pro existence within sport. Clubs are going to have to find new benefits to offer sponsors to justify, the sponsorship agreements. If we can take this new world and adapt it so that the player actually does work on the business of him or her, which is just sometimes rugby, sometimes business. It can also help the commerciality and the sustainability of the sports clubs as well. So I think we've got to work together to help get that message across and be creative to get that message across. It's great to have sort of mentors like the people on this call with so much credibility and personal experience. It's great to hear it from somebody else, isn't it? It's great that we could offer that external opinion going into the sports club. So you're not trying to tell for example, your director of rugby that you feel a bit emotionally drained or you feel a bit lost, because you're not going to open up necessarily to your coach, because he might see that as weakness. So I think there's lots of roles we can play, but in this post-COVID opportunity, we're going to have to find a viable professional sports business. And I think linking with sponsors, developing the business around the player, it's going to be a great opportunity. And I hope we can all, I'm enjoying this conversation. I love chatting to you guys. I think it's a very, very valid thing we're doing. And hopefully by working together, we can overcome some of those frustrations and those barriers.
Spot on, Tim. Thank you. Guys, I'm conscious I've taken a lot of time. I guess before I wrap up in any way, I want to give everyone the opportunity to add more if they'd like to, or say more if they'd like to. And then I'm just going to explain a little bit about what these kind of conversations will adapt into going forward. So let me go around the room first. I'm not going to go name for name, but can you just shout out or start talking if there's something you'd like to say?
Yeah, I'll just, Martin, quickly just thank everyone, really, because I know I've spoken to quite a few guys who are on the call, and just really appreciate, Steve coming on, and Dylan, from Australia, and Johan. Again, it was great to meet you over the last 2 or 3 years, and hope Israel is well, and congratulations on your new baby boy as well, and good luck with
Thank
that.
you, Coach. Thank you. Thank you.
And same with everybody, with Andre, Tim, Jonathan, everybody, Mark, Sam's obviously got off now. It's just been, with Richie and Bernard coming on. Really appreciate you guys coming on, Bernard, particularly sharing some of your stuff, going from coaching to to the business world. And yeah, it's been a really enlightening, informative session, and just thank everybody for taking part. Really, thank you.
Thanks, Phil. So before I wrap up, has anyone else got anything that they'd like to say?
I would just like to say thank you, everybody, for your time, having listened to all the great conversations, and just keep safe and keep families safe.
Thanks, Mark. Anyone else? No. In that case, so just a quickie on what next. So these, as I said at the start, these sessions are fortnightly. It'd be fantastic for you guys to join again in a couple of weeks. And I challenge you all to find one more person to come on, because obviously we want to grow these conversations and spread this word wider and bigger than it is today. The mission is to see the growth of these things, so that we are just absolutely supporting our players, our coaches, our sporting people, our clubs, and our countries, of course, especially in this tough time with COVID-19 taking over. So please do think about other people that you could encourage to join and register for us. The sessions in the future will remain like this in some ways, in terms of having open conversation with everybody, but also we will look at having some more, let's call it, controlled conversations in terms of maybe leadership, or in terms of coaching staff, or in terms of planning for the future, because we want to help open the eyes. Having these kind of conversations that we've had today is fantastic, and that we deliberately wanted it to be this style today, and it worked really well on Monday. But we also want to use the opportunity where we can to help everybody understand and know how to think in the future, and use some of the things that we've got here on YouTube, condense some of the conversations so that people do take snippets of conversation, but also, we want people to load it up and to watch the whole 2 hours of conversation, because it is absolutely invaluable. I'll be sharing this with the likes of the English and the Welsh rugby unions. I'll also look to share it with football associations as I get closer to those as well. But for me, what you are all saying, what you are all supporting with is fantastic. And I cannot thank you enough for giving up such a large amount of your, I was going to say morning, but morning or afternoon, depending where you are. And obviously, if we can help at World After Sport with any of you, with any of your colleagues in sport, then please don't be shy of just dropping us a note. But I'm going to leave it there for today. Thank you again, massively. And if there's anything I can do, just please do get in touch. Please share on social media, because we do want to grow this. We do want to help this. But thank you, guys. Have a fantastic rest of the day for those in the Northern Hemisphere, and a fantastic evening for those in the Southern. Thank you, guys, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.